Hi, Jane.
Hi, Gabriella.
Welcome to Hyphenated. What are we talking about today?
So, today we are talking about to stash or not to stash. Is that even a question? Because we have been buying some yarn recently.
Yeah.
Big quantities of yarn.
Yeah.
And Gabriella, I know over the pandemic you kind of de-stashed most of your stash.
I emptied everything almost.
Like,
I mean, this is pretty much all I
trash
have.
bag. But since I've sort of re-sparked your excitement,
Yeah.
you've been
I
buying
got all addicted
more yarn.
again.
So, I mean, I think for both of us, it's safe to say it's not a question. We are yarn stashers, but would you say that's fair? Would you identify yourself as a yarn stasher?
I'm a yarn stasher, but I would not consider myself a yarn hoarder.
Guilty.
But I don't think weren't we going to talk about, like, is that a bad thing? That's not a bad thing. Or is it a bad thing?
I mean, are we here to make judgment on
No.
stashing or not stashing?
Absolutely. And I think other people have made judgment on stashing or not
Oh,
stashing.
yeah. There's
So-
definitely a lot of judgment going on about stashes. I have been subject to people's scorn and judgment
Right?
on my stash for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. So, yeah, stashing, non-stashing. What is a stash, right?
Do you stash? Why do you stash? Why do you not stash?
Well, I think we should talk about, like, what is a stash?
All right, what's a stash, Gabriella?
Well, I'm going to ask you because I consider you a
the
kind of-
authority on stash.
well, yes, you're a kind of a bar above us, almost a lot of us, all.
Do I have the most yarn of everybody?
Well,
I don't think so. I've
No.
seen stashes bigger than mine, but mine is big. It's really funny when people come to my apartment because I have like a little cubby like that, which is very prominent when first thing you walk in, and it's full of yarn. I have it like color organized and
It's
it's
super
pretty.
cute. Yeah.
And people look at that and say, "Whoa!" And by people, I mean non-knitters usually.
Yeah.
People will say,
Normal people.
"Wow, you have a lot of yarn," and I just say, "Yeah," because the truth of it is that is just probably not even half.
The tip
Definitely not
of
even
the
half
iceberg.
of the amount of yarn that I actually have, which is taking every single storage space in my studio apartment. Except for in the kitchen. That was my boundary, like I cannot let the yarn seep into the kitchen storage.
Wait,
but
can I say how I went around your apartment?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so the first time that I went to Jane's apartment, I was like, "Oh wow, you've got a lot of yarn." And she's like, "You haven't looked in the cupboard yet." Which cupboard? All of them.
any cupboard.
I started like looking. There's like a, what do you call those? A linen cupboard where you would put your like towels and sheets and stuff like that.
I don't have those.
Full
I
of
just
yarn.
have
Full of yarn. What else was
It's
there?
called
Drawers.
Potential clothing. So other people might fill those drawers with clothes. I fill it with potential clothes. Okay.
Yeah. Well,
Future clothes.
future clothing. You're like future tripping and your future yarn. Future clothing.
It's insulation. My
It
apartment's
is
not that well
insulated.
insulated.
Well, here's the other thing I was going to say is that we have to put this in perspective that the apartment is, it's small. So it fills up quick.
That's right. If it were a bigger
fills-
apartment, it wouldn't be nearly as big a seeming a stash.
No.
Exactly. You
No.
got it.
Yeah, exactly. So I think we want to put that into perspective. It's actually
Yeah, it's a very reasonable size stash.
It is. Now, we did have, was it one of our customers or one of our boss's customers that like made a whole house, like a whole extra
house
room
out
or
of yarn?
something? No, a whole house, yeah. She made a yarn, like a house cozy out of yarn. No, she had a room built just for her yarn or something.
I've heard of that
crazy
and
like
I've
that.
seen it. Yeah, like people have like craft rooms or, why not? If you had the room in your place.
Yeah.
Have a craft room with yarn. I've seen pictures online of people with their just like rooms dedicated to their stash. Like that would be convenient because I'm like diving into my closet and trying to pull out all these boxes and stuff's falling on me to get to
Yeah.
my stash.
Yeah.
So yeah, that would be nice to have like a room full of yarn. But on the other hand, I don't know. Sometimes I feel kind of burdened by having... Burden's not the right word. Stressed or guilty? Shame? I don't know.
Well, is that
there are
'cause other
sometimes
people have-
negative feelings about my stash.
Well, is that because people have shamed you? Or is that because...
That's, I'm sure, part of it.
Yeah. Well, I got rid of a lot of my yarn. So I think here's one of the other things is like, do you de-stash? I think that one of the things that happens is for me, I bought a lot of yarn in the beginning that I really liked. I liked the colors. I really thought that was good yarn. I had all these ideas about what I was going to make with it. And I was a newer knitter. And I don't think that I had the experience about maybe getting some nicer yarns, right? Nicer quality yarns and things like that. And I also hadn't developed my style, so to speak, of something that I'm actually going to be continually wearing. So as much as I like hand-dyed yarns, I now don't purchase a lot of hand-dyed yarns because I don't end up wearing them as much. I don't end up wearing a lot of the variegated yarns as some other people might.
Or they like look so pretty in the skein and then it looks really different knit up, or it's just like,
totally.
It's great eye candy in the skein.
Yes.
You're like sitting on your shelf, it looks awesome, which is, I think, pretty legit. Like, people buy decorations and stuff, yarn functions in my mind as a decoration while I'm not using it.
Yeah.
I think it looks nice. I'm happy looking at it.
Well, the colors are beautiful and it's a lot of fun. I mean, there is some like, I think, pleasure you get for looking at the eye candy. But I did get rid of a lot of yarn. I think you had said like 2, right? I had told you I'd gotten rid of 2 huge garbage bags, and not like the little kitchen size garbage bags, but the hefty bags size, huge garbage bags of yarn. That I had been holding on to this stash, and I finally just went through it all and was like, I'm never going to knit this. And I gave it away to a local yarn guild. And they were going to use the yarn to make blankets charity stuff. Hats, blankets, whatever, it was all charity knitting. And why not? I'm not going to, I mean, some people, I think when they buy, it's not like I have disposable cash to just throw money away or yarn away or anything like that, but it was just sitting there. Now, you brought up something that was really important that I hadn't thought about, which was putting some of that yarn for sale, and I was like, oh man, I totally missed out on that, because some of that yarn I think it's either dye lots that people might need, or yarn that's discontinued. Like, I know that I have bought some things like on Ravelry for a yarn that was discontinued that I loved, that they're not making anymore.
Totally buying through people's stashes.
Right.
So I think when I've destashed, I sort of have, I don't think I've ever just, I've never just dropped a bunch of yarn off to a thrift store or a guild or anything. Because I have knitters in my life, I'll offer to, primarily my mom and sister both knit, so and my mom usually will she's happy to get yarn as long as it meets certain requirements, which are like machine washable.
But that's cool.
She likes knitting
at
gifts
least
and stuff for people.
Yeah.
Or I'll see if my sister wants it or any of my knitting friends. And then if none of them want it, well, also, if I have sweater quantities of yarn, I will list them for sale or trade on Ravelry. And I've actually been getting a lot of people inquiring, and I've made some sales that way. Which is great because it's like sweater quantities of yarn that, I liked it, or maybe I got it on a deal, or like whatever, but I've realized like I'm probably not going to knit it. So it's great somebody else can use it. And the nice thing
Exactly.
is yarn doesn't really depreciate as long as it's in good condition. But even like sometimes if say you're skeined yarn, you've already wound it into a ball, like you might lower the price a little bit for that. But generally it's not like a car where as soon as you drive it off the lot, or clothing even, that like becomes basically worthless once you've bought it.
Yeah.
Like you can still resell it usually at close to the price that you paid for it.
Which is pretty fantastic, and I did not know that. So, I don't regret giving all that yarn away, because I think that it went, to a good cause, and people were super thrilled to have it, and I was very happy to have it out of my house because it was just taking up so much room, and I knew I wasn't going to use it. I just didn't even think that was an option. So now I think in the future, I'm also more discerning about what I purchase. Hence,
Are you?
I don't know. Maybe I'm not. Well, yeah. I mean, I'm only, yeah.
So what criteria does it have to meet for you to purchase?
This is horrible. Cashmere. I'm a snob. Not in that I will only knit cashmere, but I will only knit cashmere. No. No, I think,
I've seen you buy non-cashmere
yeah, it
yarns.
had cashmere mix in it.
That's
the long
true.
dog. The
That's
only
true.
one that I did buy a couple down here that don't have cashmere in them, but I haven't used them yet. And there are some, but not only because it feels so good. It's so enjoyable to knit, and
It's hard to stop using cashmere once you've used
yeah, or a cashmere blend, and they're not all extraordinarily expensive. I mean, there are some that are.
They're all pretty expensive.
Okay, yes, they're all expensive, but I'm also not buying in the quantities that I used to buy. I'm not just, because I would go to the yarn shops. I didn't really buy yarn online, only because I want to see it and I want to feel it, and I don't think it's worth returning it. And sometimes those colors don't show. I mean, now I'm buying yarn online, but before I didn't buy yarn online because you couldn't tell the color or feel what it was like, and I think that makes a big difference. But if you're familiar with the yarn or the yarn company, I would feel more comfortable buying online. And now I do buy online because we found a place that is reasonable.
Or great. But
Yeah.
yeah, there are limitations, of course. You can't feel it. You can't. The colors sometimes are not the same, but
As online, yeah.
so
You
it is
do take a
little bit
chance, yeah.
riskier. But I've always enjoyed buying yarn online because I knit bigger projects usually, and a lot of times stores don't stock like a sweater quantity of yarn in it.
That
like,
is true.
You end up like kind of compromising on the color or whatever.
Right.
So,
Right.
I don't know. I love going to local yarn stores, obviously, but sometimes it can be hard to get.
But it depends too on what your project is. If it's
Yeah.
scarf or a hat or
Oh,
gloves
yeah,
or
totally.
something
Like
like that,
single skein,
then
smaller projects.
great, absolutely. Or a lot of people knit socks, so there's that. But sweater quantity is true. It's harder to get, and the same dye lot, which is also very important if you're doing
Totally.
sweater quantity.
But what about like minimalists? I know there's also a lot of people who are minimalist knitters. Like they won't keep a stash. They just buy yarn for the project that they're gonna knit. They choose a project. They buy yarn for it. They knit it. That's like in my mind so disciplined, and I like admire it.
Well,
Yes, I know people like
I was
this.
gonna
This is
ask
blowing
you.
your mind.
You know
Like,
people like
I
that?
know people like this. Yeah, like more than one too.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's pretty wild.
Wow.
I had a friend. She was a minimalist like throughout her life in
Okay.
many aspects of her life.
Okay.
And one time she's like, I think my stash is getting out of control, and she like laid it out. She was a yoga teacher as well. She laid it out on her yoga mat and took a picture, and it was like, I don't know, 10 balls maybe. And I was like,
it didn't fill up the whole yoga
no,
mat?
it was like a square foot of yarn.
I thought it was going to be piled on top of the yoga mat like a little
that was
mountain.
like for her a stash that was getting out of control because she didn't want to have that much stuff. And for, like, I don't know, for myself, I'm really torn between kind of two extremes. Like, I am fairly minimal in a lot of aspects of my life. I don't like to have a lot of things because I've had to move a lot in my life, and it's just so hard to move when you have more stuff. But yarn, I just enjoy buying yarn. I enjoy having yarn, and it's always a struggle for me. It's a real problem. A real problem in my life.
Well, I mean, like, how big of a problem is it? Is it a problem where, I mean, when they talk about like legit addictions, they're talking about like your life is unmanageable, you're having adverse effects from it, you know, like we don't have 12-step programs for yarn purchases.
I mean, and having worked in yarn stores, it was literally our job to persuade people to buy yarn, probably more than they need, like not more than they needed for a project, but just to keep selling them yarn. Like,
well, I mean, look, when people come into a yarn shop, they're coming in to buy yarn.
Or maybe they're coming in to like look, but it was our job to turn them into a buyer, even if they were coming in just as a looker.
Yeah. I mean, that's the job, right? That's the job. And that's how you pay the rent for the space and keep product on the shelves. But it is true. I think that for some of the customers that would come in, they would say, I have a limited amount. This is my budget, and we would really work within that budget. And that's where you look at a project for them that might work, or maybe they have an idea of a project, or maybe they don't have the budget for, what they thought they needed. And then you start hopefully looking in the the sale bin, or you go, you can mix yarn so that it's not as expensive. And, buy some of the yarns, like, remember, like, I know that we were talking in one of our other episodes about, how you can have an asymmetrical look on your sleeves or something like that. Like, you can add different yarns to be more cost effective. Or totally. If you want to even use some of your stash yarn as part of your new project, you don't have to. I think here's the other thing about the stash too, is like some people want to start using their yarn that's in their stash. And how do you get like re-inspired to use your yarn in your stash
yarn? Yeah.
What works for you?
So, well, I mean, yeah, sometimes it's like having to buy more yarn to use the yarn that's in your stash. I feel like that's legitimate, like, stash.
Yeah, sometimes you do.
I have found recently, like, I've been getting excited by older stash yarns, by holding them together with, like, combining them to make sort of, like you were saying, a newer yarn. And also it's like, you're going to knit it faster if it's a fatter yarn, and then it's kind of like, I'm using this up to make slippers or a blanket or, sweaters. It can be a fun challenge to kind of combine a bunch of different yarns or different colors into one sweater that doesn't look like crazy, like, and it'll still be something you wear.
Right.
So if you don't want to like deal with that because it's kind of a logistical challenge or design challenge, making a blanket out of it, I think, is like an easier way to do that.
Right. Or you could use, like, let's say you only have 2 skeins of a yarn. You could always get, and you want to make a sweater, you could use those 2 skeins as the trim or as stripes or as,
That's true.
Just
Yeah.
a whole sleeve and then a partial, you know what I mean? Like you could, and then you are using part of your yarn, and yes, you're buying more yarn, but you are using part of your yarn. I think that's something else. Or using even two of your stash yarns together to make one whole yarn, right? So let's say you have two fingering weight or lace weight yarns, you can put those together to make a cool combination of something that's a little bit thicker and then knit that up. And there's a ton of Stash Buster projects on Ravelry and on other sites. So I think that's something also to consider. If you want to really start getting into your stash and be more mindful about your
yarn consumption.
Yeah, absolutely. And consumerism, right?
It's so hard because yarn is, of everything that I can buy, that is the thing that holds the siren song for me. It's just like, it's so hard for me to say no to yarn. Like, I don't own a car. I ride bikes and stuff so that I can buy more yarn.
Right, but it's not the only reason you don't have a car.
Okay, that's true.
So
it
don't,
enables me to buy.
It enables
more
you
yarn,
to buy, but it's not the only, and it's actually not the reason you don't have a car.
You're right.
I mean,
you're right.
So we don't want to make you out to be like that bananas.
But like, for example, I am as much a cyclist as I am a knitter. I don't get excited about like buying bicycle stuff or even going into bike shops, but that's a whole nother topic.
There's a whole nother thing too. Is like, I remember when you knit, it's something that you can do, and I'm like dying to knit right now, and I don't have anything, and I don't want to leave the camera either. So
should have got your project.
I should have gotten my project out, but I think there's something about knitting that you can take it anywhere. Pretty much, except for like restaurants, but like, no, I mean, actually, I have knit at lunch before, so what am I talking about? No, but you can, like, doctor's offices before appointments. I always pretty much have something with me at all times, and I think that's also, it's something that you can do while watching TV, while listening to audiobooks, while doing something else, while hanging out. So it's not like you go, you buy a bike, you ride your bike, and then you put it away. It's something that is, it's also soothing and meditative, I think, depending on the project.
I guess I just bring up the bike analogy because there are like a lot of cyclists, get very excited about buying bike stuff and spend as much money, more money than knitters spend on yarn. Any enthusiast about any kind of hobbies, like, generally will put money into it, but there's something, I don't know, it's like pretty,
well, here's the other thing
soft.
Too,
it's so many, like, I get, my favorite part of the process is like the planning, and I get so excited planning projects, and then I have to like buy the yarn, even though I don't maybe have enough time to knit every single project I like dream of.
So here's the other thing too, is that there are so many, I think that the yarn, like the types of yarn and the types of fiber and the types of colors and all of that is like innumerable.
Yes,
you can't.
That's true too.
And it's not like a bike or a car. There's only a certain amount of bikes and a certain amount of cars or whatever, and there's a constant creativity going on. So of course it fires that inspiration, and that's a good feeling, is to be inspired to do something. So no wonder you're buying, because it's a really pleasurable physical feeling to be inspired to do something.
It fulfills so many of my needs.
Yeah.
There's the learning aspect. When you're buying a different type of yarn, you're learning about that.
Right.
Like, I went through a phase where it's like any kind of new kind of construction or fiber or whatever, it's like I had to have some so that I could like learn about that kind of yarn. That's a really good point. And then, also like, this is the thing I'm envisioning in my mind to make with it.
It's so creative.
And I've seen so many other justifications of, how you put this yarn into your budget. Like, it can go into the clothing section of the budget. It can go into the entertainment section of the budget.
Well, that's the thing. Yeah.
$20-$30 on a skein of yarn is like less than you're gonna spend going out to the movies or
Well, and
whatever.
remember what I used to say when we were, you know, at the shop is that it's not just the yarn, but you're actually going to have hours of entertainment from this project. It's, you know, 30 hours, 80 hours, however many hours it takes you to knit your project. That's hours of entertainment that is broken down into however much you spent on the yarn. So it's not, you know, when
It's
you
not
break
the same
it,
as just like buying clothing for that.
right, or
much
going to the
money.
movies. Like you spend how much money to go out to the movies?
For like an hour
For
and a
like
half.
an hour and a half. Right?
Yes. So we're masters at justifying the purchase of yarn, owning yarn.
Rationalizing.
I mean, we're literally professionals. So
Yes, we have an answer for everything.
every objection you might have, we can,
Yeah.
come
Yeah.
up with a way around it. But
Yeah. But I think there is something about being mindful about your yarn, you know, your purchase, you know, and
yeah, I felt like last year, I mean, 2020, when the pandemic hit, I really stopped buying anything. I didn't buy anything.
I didn't knit
pretty
for
much.
almost that whole time.
I was
until
knitting, but
we
I was
started-
mostly pulling out a stash while I was knitting in 2020.
Yeah.
But then 2021, it was like the floodgates open, and I just had to buy yarn. It was like, that's what happens often, you know, it's like going on a diet and then binging. Like, that's
Yeah.
what it felt like.
Yeah.
Because I didn't buy any
Well,
yarn.
you got me all inspired again, so now I'm like, pff, forget it. Did you see that? Yeah. I'm texting you now about the yarn.
I need the yarn. Oh my god,
Oh
I need the yarn.
God, I need the yarn. So no, but it is exciting, but I think there is that aspect that we were talking about, is that it fires all that inspiration, creativity, you know, entertainment. You know, there's a tactile feel of enjoyment too, that physical feel.
Cozy.
It's exactly.
Yes.
I mean, for me, there's nothing better than actually sitting in bed watching TV with my doggy, my little chihuahua on my lap, and covered in yarn, working on a project. It is fun.
I was talking with one of my other knitting buddies the other day, and she was just having an ode to her stash. She's like, she's been actually on the road a lot and had to put most of her stash in storage, and she recently, after I think like 2 years, has just settled and been able to access her full stash again. And she's like, I just love having my stash. I love looking at it. I love petting it. I love all my yarns that I bought even years ago. And I'm like, yeah, it's so satisfying to just be able to like go to my stash. I know I can, like, you know, people talk about having their emergency preparedness. Like, my mom's like, I can survive without leaving the house for like 2 months. I have that much like food or whatever stocked up.
Yeah.
I have like the yarn emergency. Like, I don't have to go out and buy yarn for years. I could just go to my stash and like any project I want to do, I've got the yarn for it probably, or could, you know, put something together. Are you somebody who buys yarn with a project in mind, or do you just buy the yarn that you like?
I fall in love with the yarn pretty much. And then I find a project. And I think, you know, for me, I'm in fear of running out of yarn for that particular project. That did happen to me, and it was such a bummer. It was such a cool sweater. It was the first time that I had bought like a cashmere blend. I spent a lot of money because it was a cashmere blend, and it was a cabled sweater, so it used even more yarn. And the people told me that I had enough yarn, and by the time that I finished my sweater, I was missing a whole sleeve.
Ooh, that's bad.
It was bad. And by the time I got back, they didn't tell me they were discontinuing that yarn. So, and there wasn't Ravelry then. So we didn't, or a you know, online community where I could try to find that yarn. And I called several different shops, and they didn't have that color. Like, nobody had that color. Not even just a different dye lot, like not that color. And it wasn't it wasn't the kind of sweater where you could put like a whole sleeve that was a different
Right.
color. It would have looked. It was a bummer. I put it down for, I think, like 10 years. I never looked at it again. I finally just ripped it out and gave away the yarn. Yeah.
So you have ripped almost the whole project. Okay.
Oh, no, maybe not. Maybe I didn't rip the whole thing out, but that was in one of those giveaways, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
It was a bummer. So now
now you buy excess.
I try to buy excess, and people try to talk me out of it.
I'm the opposite. I will buy. I mean, I'm the same in that I will fall in love with a yarn and just have to buy it. But I generally ballpark like, I'm probably gonna make a sweater out of this, so I just buy a sweater's worth. Usually, unless it's like a one-off hand dye that I just have to have, then I'll just buy the single skein.
Right,
I have
right.
lots of those too. But
Yeah.
I always try to buy the lowest amount of skeins I can get away with. So if I'm at like the border, I will not round up to the next skein. I will round down because I love to live on the edge. I don't know what's wrong with me. I just do that probably because I'm cheap. Honestly, like I'm trying to save like a few pennies. But then I always like, that's why most of my sweaters have like color blocking going on, honestly, because I never buy enough. And then I'll buy, like, sometimes I'm going to be like, I'm going to buy the yarn to make the whole sweater in one solid color. And I do it, and then I'm like, it's cool, but it's kind of boring. Like, I kind of having multicolored.
Okay, so I love that this whole sweater came in the solid blue. It is so cool. Yeah. Well, I mean, there is that. But, weren't we going to talk about that Reddit thing?
We could.
Are we not going to talk about that?
I feel like it's a whole, like, thing on its own that we could get into. Just
stash shaming.
Stash shaming, stash consumerism, yarn pushing. I feel like that's probably its own thing because this is, like, probably getting long already.
So we may just end with that. Those are our feelings about a stash. Unless you have more. Do you have more feelings about the stash?
I just have questions, I guess, for the viewers. Like, are you a stasher? What makes... Do you plan the project, then find the yarn? Or do you fall in love with the yarn, gotta have the yarn, and then figure out what to do with it later? And has that worked out well for you or not? Let us know.
Right.
In the comments.
Do you have shame, guilt, or any kind of, remorse about your stash? Don't let people shame you. No judging.
This is now a knitting therapy channel.
Set boundaries. No.
Stash boundaries.
set stash boundaries.
So yeah, just let us know. We we love hearing about it all.
We do. We love hearing about it all. And also any suggestions. If there's anything you guys want us to cover, content, topics, whatever, we're happy to try to, get into that and cover those topics for you.
Let us know. And as always, like, share, subscribe. Thanks for being here. Thanks for watching. And we'll see you next time.